This is Waco, in the heart of Texas, just 18 miles from President Bush's ranch. Texas Rangers are on the trail of a wanted fugitive. It's law enforcement in the spirit of the Wild West.
Jack, see your hands, see your hands. Let's go. Everybody out. Out now. Keep your hands. Anybody else in there?
Yeah, my husband, he's naked.
Tell him to come out. Come on out. Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands now.
Show me your hands.
Come on out. Get out now. Now.
Step out.
What's your name?
Ted Bill.
What is it?
Ted Bill.
George Bush became governor of Texas by promising a return to the cowboy tradition of getting tough on criminals. It worked. Crime in the state was halved, and Bush moved on to the White House. I'd come to Texas to see what we in Britain could learn from Bush's experiment in the Lone Star State. My journey started in Fort Worth, the original cow town, at the heart of this huge state. Texans project an aura of confidence. They have a view of the world that is simple but powerful. There are good guys and bad guys, a view that George Bush clearly shares. In the 1980s, the Lone Star State experienced a huge surge in crime. In 1994, George W. Bush was elected governor on a pledge to get tough with criminals. He tripled the number of prison beds and promised in particular to get tough on young offenders. The result has been a huge drop in crime, and the methods he used have come to be known as the Texas solution.
The vote carries with it an awesome responsibility. Texas is ready for a new generation of leadership, and I will provide that.
Bush told the voters government could only do so much, and he called upon Texans to draw on their frontier spirit and get actively involved in the fight against crime. Bikers against child abuse may look like outlaws, but these are the sort of active citizens that Texas produces. There were 60 of them, riding out like a posse in a western to adopt an abused child into their biker family. Leading the ride was the chapter president, Brian Humble, nicknamed Brass.
Now about the kids. Hellbug, 8 years old, who was sexually molested by her step-grandfather. It happened in her home, in her bedroom while he was babysitting. Hot Rod is her 6.5-year-old brother. He's the one that walked in and saw Grandpa doing the deed. What he told the little boy when he walked in the room was, close your eyes until Grandpa's done. Dad has come to grips. He's ready to see his dad go to jail and rot there.
After the briefing, we rode into the abused child's neighborhood en masse, a show of support and a powerful warning to the abuser.
This is Hot Rod, newest member, Baca. From this day forward, you are a member of our family, we're a member of yours. Hellbug. We're here for one reason only, and that's to support you guys and protect you guys. We don't want you guys to feel afraid anymore, okay?
I thought the children might be intimidated, but they were totally won over by their new guardians.
Take care, okay? You need anything, you let us know, okay, buddy? All right.
What's the motivation for the members of Baca? Why do they get involved in this?
A lot of our members were abused as children, and they didn't have the support network that we provide 15, 20, some 30 years ago.
Do you think there's something particularly Texan about that? You know, you're heavily involved in something which I think in Britain people would leave to the police or the social services or some...
Social services in the state of Texas can only do so much.
Would you ever consider using force?
We don't condone any violence, but if we have to be the barrier between that child and that perpetrator, and there's nobody else to be there, we will intervene.
There was something typically Texan about the bikers' desire to stick up for what they thought was right. These were modern-day cowboys, driving off the bad guys and riding into the sunset with their job done. Active citizenship is not just about having a motorbike. Under Bush, radical new gun laws allowed every Texan to feel like a modern-day cowboy. From Fort Worth, I drove south to Austin, seat of the state government. Gun control was central to Bush's campaign for the governorship here in 1994. His predecessor, Ann Richards, had said she would veto a bill that would have given Texans the right to carry concealed handguns. Bush said that if elected, he'd sign the bill into law, and he was duly elected. I'm off to meet a woman who, in 1994, was just an ordinary Texan citizen, but who became central to the adoption of the so-called concealed carry law. Susanna Hupp used to be a physiotherapist. One day in 1991, she met her parents for lunch in her favorite diner, and her life changed.
We were done eating, and all of a sudden this guy drove his truck through the window. And of course we thought it was an accident. And then we heard gunshots. He literally was just simply going from one person to the next. He had complete control over the situation. He would take aim, pull the trigger. Go to the next person, take aim, pull the trigger. When I realized it, I thought, I've got this guy, I've got him. I reached for my purse on the floor next to me, and I realized that a few months earlier I made what I absolutely consider to be the stupidest decision of my entire life. I was beginning to leave my gun out in my car. But at that point, my father took my attention, and he was saying, I've got to do something, I've got to do something. He's going to kill everybody in here. He got up and ran at the man. But again, the guy had total control of the situation, and he just simply turned and shot my father in the chest. My mother crawled out to where my dad was and was cradling him, and the guy got to her. She looked up at him. He put a gun to her head. She put her head down, and he pulled the trigger.
23 people were killed that day. Susanna believes that if it had been legal to carry her gun, she could have saved her parents' lives. She began campaigning to change the law and became a politician in the process. She remains convinced that the concealed carry law has made Texas a safer state. But the guns that he used to commit the massacre were legally bought?
Absolutely.
So don't you think that another way of looking at it would be to say if gun control had been strict, or if it had been impossible for him to buy them, then he wouldn't have been able to commit the massacre in the first place?
I'm sorry. I'm chuckling because that seems, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but that seems such an absurd statement to me. I promise you, if I wake up in the middle of the night and there's someone in my home, I'm not going to turn on the light to see how old they are. I'm not going to say, excuse me, what color are you? Are you of age? Are you just here to take some money for drugs, or are you here to murder my children and rape me? I'm not going to ask any of those questions. I'm going to point and I'm going to pull the trigger.
The first time the target's turned to face you, shoot twice. The next time the target's turned to face you, shoot 3 times. Any questions? Fire.
In advocating stricter gun control, I'm the extremist. Texans agree with Susanna Hupp and George Bush. They want the right to protect themselves and their families. Since the concealed carry law was passed, 250,000 permits have been issued. Supporters of the law say it's caused a measurable drop in crime.
Okay, shooters. This is 5 rounds in 10 seconds from 21 feet. 21 feet is the distance at which, if you're in a confrontational situation and somebody charges you, this is the minimum distance that you need, or they'll get to you before you can defend yourself. Any questions? You may load your weapons with 5 rounds.
To qualify for a permit, Texans have to pass a weapons training course. I'd come to the outskirts of Austin to a course run by Tom Schaefer, a former police officer.
What kind of people come on this course?
I have professionals of all trades. I have doctors and lawyers and nurses and accountants. We've got a guy here in class today that's a retired engineer. We have another one that was in the military.
Why do they come on the course?
Well, they want to feel a sense of protection. We live in a society that has a lot of criminals in it, and they're violent criminals. And if you don't have any means at all other than your wits about you to defend yourself, we have some people that will just shoot you just to watch you be shot. And it's the idea that they have a perception of being safe if they have a tool besides their mind.
Do you think that an armed society is a safer society?
I'm convinced of it. From all my years in police work, you know, I never did have an honest citizen pull a gun on me.
Why did you want to have the concealed carry permit?
Because I want to be able to protect myself. No one else in some instances can do that for me. Not the police, not my husband.
There's just a lot of situations that an innocent person can get themselves into where there's a possibility of the need to defend yourself. And I hope that I never have to do it, but I wanted the permit to be able to have the right to protect myself and my family.
Say a police officer pulls you over and asks for some form of ID and you hand him that concealed carry permit. What does that tell him about you?
Anytime you stop a car, you don't know whether he's a good guy or a bad guy, because what's a bad guy look like? You don't know what a bad guy looks like until he attacks you or does something wrong with you. But when he walks up to the car and you produce that permit, he knows you have to be a good guy.
That also implies that you all feel like you're the good guys. You're confident that you're the good guys.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
How do you know who the bad guys are?
Attitude.
Okay, Oscar, you've just pulled up at a traffic light. You've got traffic in front of you. You've got traffic in back of you. And somebody approaches your vehicle. Just handle it, okay? Hey, buddy, how you doing? You hadn't got $1 for a poor guy that I work for a living.
I appreciate that.
I will. I'll be glad. You got any work that you need me to do for you?
No, I really don't.
Man, I tell you, you got such a nice truck here. Could you give me a ride downtown, please?
I appreciate your concern, but I can't help you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Please.
All right, what do you think? Do you think it's a wise idea to let a stranger open your door?
No.
Okay, let's try it again. Hey, buddy, how's it going today? You need your windows washed?
Hey, no.
Hey, get out of that truck. Back off. Okay, that's exactly what you're supposed to do.
When that door came open.
Violent action to grab the door open.
That door came open. That was my... Go ahead.
He made a move at you.
He made an aggressive...
He turned nasty.
Aggressive move to get
when he pulled that door, he violated my space.
After he told me to back off.
How's that going to stand up in a court of law?
Because it's a reasonable fear. Is it reasonable for somebody to come up to your door and jerk your door open? What good could come out of it for you for a perfect stranger coming using physical force to try to get to you? Perfectly okay.
After a week in Texas, it struck me that George Bush's call to arms had found a receptive audience. Texas's self-styled good guys were not only willing to uphold the law, they were ready to enforce it. From Austin, I drove south to Houston, the fourth largest city in the US. It has a population of 2 million people, and though it's still known as the murder capital of Texas, crime here has fallen dramatically.
In the year 2000, there were 280 murders here, which sounds like a lot, until you find out that pre-Bush and the Texas solution, the murder rate was more than double that. In 1991, there were 710 murders here.
All rise. The 185th District Court is now in session. The Honorable Susan Brown presiding.
Be seated, please. Mr. Lawrence, you're before the court, charged with a motion to adjudicate your guilt for the offense of aggravated assault. How do you plead, sir, to the allegations contained in the motion that you did not report to the Adult Probation Department as you were instructed? True or not true?
True, ma'am.
Having nothing further to say, is the order of this court that you be remanded to the custody of the Harris County Sheriff to be transported to the
Even with crime supposedly cracked, there are more murders in this city every year than there are in the whole of
I will
England.
give you credit for any of the time you've been in custody, but I cannot give you credit by law for the time you spent in boot camp. Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I was amazed to learn that support for the death penalty is about the same here as it is in the UK, with roughly 68% in favour. Texan justice reflects the public's wishes much more directly than in Britain. One aspect of that is that even judges and district attorneys are elected.
I think it's interesting to people in the UK that you guys are elected. Do you think that makes a difference to the kind of justice that you mete out? Or do you think that in some way you're answerable to the people that elected you?
Oh, I certainly think you're answerable to them, because I think that what the wishes of the general public, of the community, should be reflected here. And I think that we get a sense of that in trying cases. You know, we see what juries give to particular people for particular crimes. I'll tell you that in the cases that we try, those 12 people that we put in the jury box they're tough. Sometimes their verdicts are surprisingly strong.
How many capital cases have you presided over as a judge?
As a judge, 5.
And how many of those? So they were seeking the death penalty in all
The
those
state
cases?
was seeking the death penalty in each of those cases.
And what were the verdicts reached?
All of those defendants were found guilty, and all of them received the death penalty.
And the death penalty being carried out?
No. No, they're all in the appellate system, either in state court or in federal court at this point.
Did you agonize over the cases? Did it bother you that you were seeking to end someone's life, however heinous a crime they might have committed?
I don't know if agonize is the right word, because at the prosecutor's office, you're dealing with the victims' families on a day-to-day basis, and you know what effect this has had on their family. And so you more see it, when you see it from that victim standpoint and you know how horrific the crime is, your concern about the offender is not as great.
More than half of the judges in this district are women, but there's nothing particularly feminine about the county's zeal to use the death penalty. Whether women or men, they wouldn't win their elections if they stood against it. For District Attorney Chuck Rosenthal, it's also a matter of religious conviction.
How do you reconcile it with your conscience, seeking the death penalty, well, seeking to put someone to death? Do you have any difficulty with it?
I think the death penalty is a biblical proposition, and I believe the Bible, and so I don't have any personal reservations about the death penalty.
But the Bible does say, "Thou shalt not kill." Doesn't that apply?
No, it says, "Thou shalt not murder." If you look at the modern translations in Deuteronomy and Exodus, it says, "Thou shalt not murder," and provides some very stiff penalties for those who do commit murder.
Although I'm against the death penalty, I understand its appeal. But I was surprised to find the DA of Harris County using the Bible to justify it. And though I'm not religious, my Bible definitely still says, "Thou shalt not kill." But as it turned out, Texans don't see a contradiction between punishment and forgiveness. In fact, I was about to meet some who were in favor of both. I'd heard about a victim support group in Houston called Bridges to Life, most of whom were pro the death penalty, but who also feel that forgiving the murderer is part of the healing process.
I just wondered if you could go around the room and briefly say what your experience of violent crime has been.
Well, my sister was murdered in 1993, and there was 2 killers, and both killers were apprehended and both received capital punishment, death penalty sentences.
And my daughter was murdered in '86 on her 21st birthday, and he was apprehended and also received the death penalty.
And my daughter was murdered in 1986, and he received the death penalty and was executed.
Do you consider that you've all been able to forgive the perpetrators of these crimes against you?
Yeah, I have.
Yes.
Yes.
You were asked about forgiveness. In my case, not totally, but sometimes part of forgiveness is just kind of a self-defense the options are not very good, because in not forgiving, you become a total prisoner, you become totally in pain, and the lack or absence of forgiveness brings a lot more problems to a person than forgiving.
Paula Kurland's daughter Mitzi was murdered in 1986 on her 21st birthday. The killer was a man called Jonathan Nobles, who'd been stalking her roommate.
She ended up bleeding to death in the corner of her closet. He had stabbed her 28 times.
Paula went against the wishes of her family and arranged to meet Nobles on death row.
I had to talk to Jonathan, and I didn't want to know why he had murdered my daughter. The fact that he did it was more information than I really wanted. But I needed to talk to him. There were just some things that I needed to say to him and to him only.
The encounter was filmed by American television.
Pretty hard, isn't it?
It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Dying is easier than this.
This is Mitzi. She was a real person, Jonathan. She was real. And she was nothing to you. But she was my whole life. She was my baby. And you can't imagine what you've done. The fact that he was going to be executed was something that just had to be done. I mean, the crime that he committed was so heinous that, and in Texas, it has to be the worst of the worst to get the death penalty. And do I think that it was a justified sentence? Yes, I do. When God let me know that I didn't have to forgive what he did, that I had to forgive him, it was very difficult. And I still fought the fact that I had to do it, but being a Christian, it's something that you have to do.
Jonathan Nobles was executed by lethal injection on the 7th of October 1998. Instead of a last meal, he took communion. Paula Kurland attended the execution. In Texas, forgiveness does not mean mercy.
Well, it is high time to holler down the pipe chase and rattle them bars. We're going to do a prison show for you right here on KPFT. It is Friday night out, and Ray Hill and the gang is here. Here is the music of Ross Burt.
I can't believe there's so much hate.
I was halfway through my journey in the Lone Star State. The Texans I'd met seemed to be telling me that Bush's approach had been a total success. Yet I was about to see a different side of the Texas solution. I'd arranged to meet another victim of crime. His name was Ross Byrd. Ross's father, James Byrd, was murdered in a notorious incident in Jasper, Texas. White racists chained him to a pickup truck and killed him. Ross and I had been invited to a debate about justice on talk radio, hosted by an ex-convict and a Houston defense attorney.
Question. We have 2.1 million people locked up in a nation the size of the United States. Is that too many?
It's not too many if you consider that in Texas, that's probably one of the reasons for the reduction in crime on the streets. We've locked them up.
Marcel, what do you think about from the other side of the pond?
What I've seen so far is that it seems the state, there's no shortage of political will to get tough on crime and hand out long sentences and the death penalty. I was also struck by something Ross said earlier, which is that there are more black people locked up in Texas than there are
in schools.
Mm-hmm. And that seems an astonishing statistic to me.
they're the ones that are committing the crimes. We don't lock up people for not committing crimes. The black community just has to get it, the culture has to get to where they're a no-nonsense culture. They're not going to tolerate it. But this business that we're racist, we're locking up black people, that's not true.
Every black citizen in Texas knows that history, do they?
We is the only race that haven't got reparations. You know, people want to forget that we built this country.
I think black people ought to be very grateful that they're in this country and that they have these the opportunities that are available, and all you got to do is access it. Have done, this country has responded more to the black people than we can.
The discussion degenerated from there, but it touched on some raw issues, a reminder of the deep divisions in Texan society. For whatever reason, the minority blacks and Hispanics make up the majority of the prison population. I followed Ross across town to a church in a Houston suburb. It was an anti-death penalty meeting. There wasn't much of a turnout. In Texas, executions are often better attended than this. Ross opposes the execution of his father's murderers. He's also been brought up on the Bible, but his was the old translation, which still says, "Thou shalt not kill."
This all began off a conscious mind decision. You know, my manager, Ricky Jason, he was asking me, are you going to go to the execution? And around about that time, I was thinking, no, I don't want no part of it. You know, that's not going to really help me any way, form, or fashion.
People would understand, I think, if you said, you know, not only do I want them dead, I want to see them dead in as horrible a way as they put my father to death.
That right there only keep the hate going. It's been going on for all the years. It was just, I would be the poster boy for the death penalty, you know, and that's not how my life's gonna go.
After a week of hearing contradictory arguments about capital punishment, I got the news that my request to visit death row had been approved. There was an inmate I wanted to speak to. Back in Houston, Judge Susan Brown had told me about a man called Bobby James Moore. He'd shot a man's head off in a bungled robbery, but after 23 years awaiting execution, she said he was a reformed character.
He's been a mentor on death row, so he has truly changed. You couldn't go any further in rehabilitation.
Bobby, you don't feel, you're not an innocent man. You never claimed to be an innocent man. You are guilty of the crime you committed.
Yes, I'm guilty of the crime that I committed. I especially accept responsibility for my actions, if I could go and change what happened 20 years ago, that was possible, I would,
Susan Brown said that she felt that you really had changed during your time here. That a lot of people have felt that you are a different person from the Bobby Moore who was committed here 23 years ago.
Most of the people that knew me over the years and people that I had the opportunity to meet when I went back for the trial, all felt that, from their own perspective that I had changed over the years, which is true, I have changed a great deal. I'm not who I was 20 years ago.
Bobby has had various appeals turned down. He now has one pending, but time is running out. It's a disturbing fact that black people make up 13% of the population of Texas, but 41% of death row. Under George Bush, the state executed 152 people, but not one of them was a white man convicted of murdering a black man. Death row is the end of the line for Texas's bad guys, however much they've changed. But in George Bush's Texas solution, there is a way to turn bad guys into good guys.
Those who are people of faith, they are blessed, they are made happy, they are favored by God with the faithful Abraham. Listen to these words again. It's a scripture foreseeing that God would justify you because of your faith, proclaimed the good news to Abraham in this promise, saying, in you shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. So the man in here who begins to trust in God alone, his life is going to be blessed, made happy, and favored by God, the way it was with Abraham.
This is Bush's biggest innovation, a by now familiar Texan combination of God and punishment, America's first religious prison, and regarded as a model for what the president calls faith-based initiatives.
By each one of us taking your word and trusting you with it.
The Vance unit opened in 1997. It houses almost 300 inmates who apply to join when they're within 18 to 36 months of the end of their sentences. They lose privileges when they come here, and they don't get released any quicker, but they receive intensive Bible study and support when they're released. Statistics suggest that the program has cut the rate of reoffending. I wondered if it was real, or the convenient conversions that critics call jailhouse religion. Salvador Delgado used to be a gang member and drug dealer. He came to the Vance unit while serving time for his 5th offence, assaulting a police officer. He told me the unit is run like a college. Between 30 and 40 inmates enter the program in each intake and live and study together. He told me about life before he found Jesus.
This is my home here.
It's small, isn't it?
Yes, these are the living quarters. This is rather the largest bunk in this place.
Is it? How did you get that?
Well, just Jesus, I guess.
You just gave me the biggest.
You know, but
what were you like?
A monster.
You were a monster.
I was a monster. I got a case right now for running over a police with a vehicle.
What do you mean? That? When did you do that? You did that?
Yes, this crime that I'm on now.
Is that what you did? You ran the guy?
Assault. He stopped in front and had a pistol on me and told me get out, and I didn't stop.
So what changed you?
In there. What changed me was Jesus.
But what about people who say what you got is jailhouse religion?
Jailhouse religion, I don't know, you know, but I know one thing: statistics will prove different. Find me in 5 years from now, and if you see me somewhere in London on the streets preaching the gospel, you sit there and you wave at me in England.
All right, that's a good challenge.
You sit there and you shake my hand and you say, I see that it wasn't jailhouse.
While he was governor, George Bush made a very public visit to the Vance unit. Bush famously became a born-again Christian on his 40th birthday in 1986. This is one of his pet innovations. It's mold-breaking. Not only does it involve a charity providing a government service, but it also runs against America's traditional separation of church and state. The program director is Philip Dortridge.
Is it real, or is it jailhouse religion that they're getting here?
Well, I think you've seen today, and I think that's one of the greatest things about you coming out here is you could feel it. And I think that's something every day that I can feel, I can see, and we can touch. I really don't think in jailhouse religion you can do that.
He's very popular with the president. He's very proud of this program, isn't he?
Definitely. And when he was governor, obviously he made the decision to give us an opportunity to open this unit. Has visited here once as governor. And has talked about us several times, but I think that just goes back to his views on his own personal faith and what he really believes works and what's worked for him personally.
I will sing again.
I found it impossible to come to the Vance unit and not be moved by the spectacle of these men who include murderers and hardened criminals joined in prayer. But there was something profoundly weird about it too. The president sees the Vance unit as a model for the rest of the country. In Bush's New America, the government-approved method for rehabilitating adult criminals turns out to be the president's idea of salvation. As we finished our visit, we were allowed to film 3 inmates graduating from the program. Armed with their Bibles and their new faith, they were off to rejoin society. Born-again good guys. When George Bush ran for governor, Texas had a soaring juvenile crime rate. While he was in office, the number of youths sent to juvenile institutions increased by more than 50%. Governor Bush had delivered what he'd promised, but I worried that he was storing up terrible problems for the future. I'd come to Giddings Youth Prison, wondering if, like its counterparts in Britain, it was an academy of crime. Inmates at Giddings are the most serious young offenders in the state of Texas. 90% of the boys here have committed serious felony offences. They're here to receive rehabilitation and correctional therapy. This is Texas's answer to cracking youth crime. Giddings is a boot camp, run on a military regime of 16-hour days and no-nonsense discipline. Violent misbehaviour is punished by a spell in the isolation unit, locked up with points held against your record. Boot camps were tried in the UK by the last Tory government. They were an expensive failure. A study found that offenders were even more likely to go on and commit violent crimes after leaving. Here at Giddings, they've addressed that head-on with a surprisingly forward-thinking approach to sentencing and rehabilitation. Giddings runs the Capital Offenders Programme. It lasts 6 months and aims to teach empathy to some of the worst young offenders. In the first stage of rehabilitation, the offenders have to recount their crimes. The session was begun by Luis Chavez.
My name is Luis Chavez. I'm 18 years old. I'm from El Paso, Texas. I'm responsible for murder and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon of Christian Garcia, age 18, relationship rival gang member, and Edgar Dominguez, age 18, relationship rival gang member. I aimed towards him and I fired once. Before I fired, I was feeling nervous and scared. But once I fired, those feelings went away. I felt powerful, I felt in control. I felt like I couldn't be stopped. So then I shot again. I cocked the shotgun and I shot again. I had seen Christian fall to the ground. He fell face first on his knee and he began rolling, grabbing his back. Due to my gang involvement, I received a determinate sentence of 35 years. With a minimum period of confinement of 36 months in the TYC program.
As governor of Texas, George Bush lowered the age at which criminals could receive the death penalty from 18 to 17, sending a warning to Texas's youths. But in tough love schools like Giddings, he also gave youths like Luis a chance to change. The fact that Texas has the death penalty and seems to be quite keen on using it, does that ever enter your mind as a factor?
It does. I mean, when I first did my crime, they was trying to charge me as an adult, which I could have gotten the death penalty or life sentence. But I got a second chance, and I still think about it. I still see how I was rewarded a second chance to see if I would change or not.
Are you sincere about what you're doing here? Does it come from the heart?
Yes, sir. First, I came in here thinking, man, I just gonna do my 3 years. I didn't know about going through a group or anything about it, so I thought I'm just gonna do my 3 years and get out, go back to what I was doing. Yeah, I still have internal struggles with my gang-related values, cause I still have ex-gang members out there that talk to my sister and tell her that they're waiting on me to get out, and they would like to associate with me still. But I still struggle within myself to committing myself to changing.
Youths at Giddings are encouraged to go back to their schooling to prepare themselves for work in the outside world. 18-year-old Prassett has just passed his high school diploma and is preparing to leave in a few months. Prassett was a member of the Asian Pride gang from Amarillo and was involved in the ambush of a rival gang member.
You shot one guy in the back. What happened to the man you shot?
Man, I shot. Right now, he's paralyzed right now from the waist down after being shot like 14 times in the back. And
you shot him 14 times in the back with a Tech-9?
Yes, sir. And right now, he's paralyzed and still going through a lot of pain and stuff. And I understand, too, how other people feel, and, like, I'm saying, since I'm already committed a crime and they would like to see me stay in here. And I understand from that, but I am putting my effort and everything to change because that's what I want deep down inside my heart. That's what I want to do, is change. It's not for myself, but for my victim, I'm saying.
Prassett and Luis seem determined to make good. Program coordinator Dr. Ann Kelly believes that they can genuinely turn their lives around.
I think that there are many young people here that are sincere, and I think there's some that are hardened and won't change. I think over the long haul, I think most of them start off deciding that they're just going to talk the talk and try to get away with it, and I think as the time goes by, they learn that, you know, Luis may learn to talk the talk to get out of here in 3 years. However, he has to survive another 33 years on parole. And he knows that. And so there comes a point in their lives where they know, if I don't really make a change and I'm just talking the talk, I'll never make it out there in the streets.
Only 11% of the youths who complete Giddings Capital Offenders Program are reincarcerated for violent offences. With 30 years of prison hanging over their heads if they violate the terms of their parole, these young men know they've been given one last chance. It seems a simple way of keeping them on the straight and narrow. Giddings suggested an almost liberal approach to the possible problems of having such a large prison population. This feeling was reinforced by a visit to an all-female unit just 3 hours away, another surprisingly progressive part of the Texas solution.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Hello.
I'm Marcel.
I'm Monique Williams.
Monique, nice to meet you.
I'm Shatina.
Shatina, nice to meet you too. Well, do you guys want to take me on a tour?
Sure. I'll show you my room. This is where
that's
we
nice.
stay.
This is a nice room. Because I've been at Giddings, I've seen the rooms that this is a little bit better than that. Your child was born while you were in
Victoria.
In Victoria, which is a prison essentially.
Yes.
So you didn't have a mom or anything to show you your parenting skills.
No, sir.
This is called Wings, Women in Need of Greater Strength. Bush thought educating these girls in motherhood could turn them into responsible citizens, and rejected the arguments of Republicans who called for the compulsory adoption of the children of criminals. Drugs and violence were part of the fabric of these women's lives. Even so, I was taken aback by what Shatina had done.
I got into an argument with the girl at school, and it happened like 2 years ago and led on to another year. And in 2002, we got into an argument again, and I had my box cutter on me and I carved my name on her face.
You had your what on you?
Box cutter.
You had a box cutter on you and you carved your name on her face?
Yes.
Was it a gang thing, or was it just a beef that you two had between yourselves?
It was beef that we had.
Right, okay.
Monique and Shatina told me the system at Wings had encouraged them to change by giving them a chance to be united with their children.
What do you think you've learned here?
Most of all, I learned a lot of responsibility, a lot of independence.
And you feel confident that you're ready for the big bad world?
Yes, sir. This is my second time going to independent living. The first time I messed up. Now I'm going back again and trying to do it different.
What's the difference between this time and the time you messed up?
The first time, because I was still into drugs, it's all about my son. It's not about me. I'm not the only person living my life no more. I have to live my life for my son.
I've got to say, Shatina, I was so surprised when you told me what your crime was. Does it surprise you at all?
Right. I knew, like, when I committed my crime, I felt like it wasn't me. I could have just walked away from it, but I chose not to. And I take full responsibility for my actions, and I feel sorry for what I've done. And I apologize. I want to apologize to her, but I'm scared too. I'm scared like she's going to hold that grudge forever.
What are you going to do when you get out? What will be the plan?
Well, I'm going to go find a job at like a McDonald's, or I might just stay in school, attending Hastings and A-Leap School District.
Is that going to be a different school from the one you were in before?
Right.
Okay. Thank you, young man.
Shatina would be graduating in a week. In a way, getting through Wings was the easy part. Working and raising a child in the rough neighborhood she'd come from would be much harder. I worried that this might not be her son Devontae's last experience of the Texas solution. It's estimated that 1 out of every 10 American boys born in 2001 will go to jail in their lifetime. But for black male children, the figure is closer to 1 in 3. I'd come to the end of my journey through Texas. We spent our last night in Houston. It was the mayoral elections. The contest was too close to call. At the Doubletree Hotel, Democrat Bill White was rallying his supporters. Across town, Orlando Sanchez, the Republican candidate, was also claiming victory.
Early returns are looking good. We're going to turn this city around, and we're going to have change at City Hall.
I'd seen what the Texas solution had achieved, and I wanted to know from everyday citizens whether they thought crime was still a problem.
Crime, is it a big issue for Houstonians?
No, I don't. At this point in time, no, I don't believe it is. There were so many other areas, so many other issues that predominated.
Over the last 10 years, a lot of our judges have become much more conservative, a lot tougher on crime. And I think we've got a lot of transportation issues the city's grappling with.
Is crime a big issue this time round?
No, traffic. Traffic is bigger than crime.
Whatever their politics, these white middle-class Houstonians felt the Texas solution was the right one, and they wanted more of the same. Looking back over my journey, I couldn't help fearing the long-term consequences of the Texas solution. If Texas were a country, it would have the highest incarceration rate of anywhere in the world. And while Bush was building more prisons, the number of Texans living in poverty, a root cause of crime, increased by about 20%. I felt I'd gotten insight into Texas itself and its view of the world, a view deeply infused with religion that divides people into good guys and bad guys, which sees things in black and white, and which, through its most famous son, is now shaping the whole world.